There are two core mindsets when it comes to money. One will make you rich, the other will make you poor. The one that will lead you to being rich is the investment mindset. The one that will make you poor is the cost mindset. If you view things as a cost, for example, mentorship, learning, relationships, hiring people, teaming with people, investing in things that give you more time. If you view those things as costs, then you probably won't do it and you'll be angry when you do. Just as an example, if you were to invest in a book, then you would, if you saw it as a cost, you would first off probably avoid doing it, but you would also not soak up the learning. If you view it as a cost, then you think, okay, this book cost me $25. I need to find a way to get $25 back from this book. If you invest in a mentorship, if there's like a learning opportunity or a learning experience that's $2,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, if you view it as a cost, then you'll be so much thinking about how you can get that value back that you're not going to be open to the learning transformation that's available. If, on the other hand, you view it as an investment in yourself and in your future self, then you can be open-minded to huge experiences. Let me give one example. Hiring an assistant. A lot of entrepreneurs out there, a lot of people, even people who are employees, they're so busy and they have 1,000 things to do that they're distracted and they're not able to get into a flow state. They're not able to focus on a bigger picture because they're so caught in the mundane routine tasks. If they were to invest $10, $15 an hour, maybe even $20 an hour for a really good one, and offload themselves, offload their calendar, offload their email, offload a lot of the tasks, even 20 hours a week, then they would free their mind in order to think about different things, whether that be planning towards a bigger future, maybe creating connections, learning about industries, or maybe even just focusing on their high impact work. There's a principle, the 80-20 principle, that 80% of your results come from 20% of what you do. Because most people have a cost mindset, they're not willing to invest in, let's just say, an assistant. They would see that as a cost, and because of that, they would see a person as a cost. You never want to see a person as a cost. But if you invest in an example, an assistant, and you view that as an investment in yourself, I've just given myself 20 hours back so that I can focus more on those 20% of activities that create 80% of the results. Whatever you're good at, whether that be creative work or planning work or strategic work or design, whatever it is, because you're no longer doing those other 80% of activities that are only producing 20% of your results, you've now given those to someone else. You've offloaded that. You've invested in a who. Dan Sullivan and I wrote a book called Who Not How. And the only way to apply this principle at a beautiful level is to have an investment mindset. But it's not just investing in people, it's investing in experiences. It's investing in relationships. It's investing in, it could be your health. If you see it as a cost to get a gym membership rather than an investment, then you will probably have anger towards it or you won't want to do it. A lot of people with a cost mindset, they stay in a poverty mindset because they would rather give away their time to save money rather than investing money to create more and higher quality time. If you want to have higher quality time and if you want your future self to be better and more capable and more free than your current self, then you need to start making investments in people, in experiences, in relationships, in education. Anytime you make an investment towards your future self and you free yourself to do better and better things, then your future self keeps getting bigger. That's the idea of investment, and that's the idea of the investment mindset, is that you've invested something and now it can grow and become bigger and better as a result. If you see it from a cost mindset, then you don't actually view it as an asset that can grow. You just think it's linear. You've paid for it and you are just trying to get the value out of it. You're trying to squeeze it. Whereas if you've got an investment mindset, you believe that it can grow, transform, and become better and better. If you want to become wealthy, if you want to become successful, if you want to become free, if you want more creativity, if you want more flow, if you want more happiness, if you want increased capability and freedom towards your future self, then you need to really embrace the investment mindset. Invest in people. Invest in experiences, invest in relationships, invest in things that give you more time and give you better time, to invest in those activities that are 20% of your work that create 80% of your results, or to invest in more time with your loved ones, or more transformational experiences, or more education that transforms your mind and allows you higher capabilities. You get to the point where you start investing in more and more who's, and that's where you ultimately become a leader and an entrepreneur. You've now got an assistant that's got your email taken care of and a lot of the tasks. And now you have another goal. It could be anything. And you might have wanted to write a book, but you're not a writer. So maybe you invest in a who. You invest in a writer, a ghostwriter who writes that. Now all of a sudden you don't have to be the one doing it because you've now invested in someone that can do it for you. It's more an investment in your current and your future self. The more investments you're willing to make, the bigger your future self will be. The more seeds you plant right now, the more you'll have an orchard for your future self. It is people who invest and have assets. Assets being knowledge, relationships, but also hard assets like real estate, stocks, crypto. If you're an investment-minded person, your future self keeps growing because it's assets that inflate dramatically, versus if you have a cost mindset, you're trying so hard to cut costs or pinching every penny that you will forego the learning and the higher opportunities because you're so focused right here on the details. Instead, you want someone else to focus on those details so that you can focus on the big picture, you can focus on the work that you want to do. So the question is, do you have a cost mindset or do you have an investment mindset? If you have an investment mindset, your future self will keep getting bigger. If you have a cost mindset, then you're overvaluing the wrong thing. You're having a poverty mindset. You're having a scarcity mindset. With an investment mindset, you know that the pie can keep getting bigger. You know that there can be bigger and more powerful games out there. Whereas if you have the cost mindset and you view everything as a cost, then you will not have the ability to afford much. It takes courage, by the way, to invest. There is some risk in hiring someone or in taking an educational experience. There's no guarantee with an investment. And that's one of the reasons why people don't invest, is because it seems risky. It seems scary. Even non-risky things like investing in the stock market, like as an example, the S&P 500, or investing in real estate. Because there's some form of uncertainty and there's a lack of confidence and knowledge and experience, it feels risky. There's no guarantee, and that's true. You make investments and there is no guarantee. And you're fine with that. You take on a little risk. That's part of the investment, but you also grow in capability. You grow in confidence. You grow in skill. You put yourself in a position where you have to grow. If you make an investment, whether that be in an actual asset or whether that be in a person, now you've got to grow as a person. You've now put yourself in a position where you've got to grow. What's interesting is that all behavior is addictive. So if you start investing, let's just say, into your future self, you'll want to do more of that. If you start cutting costs, and if you start avoiding investments, and if you start trying to squeeze the juice out of everything, you'll become more stingy. You'll become less transformative. You'll become less abundant. You'll become less transformational. So one of these mindsets is transactional. The other one is transformational. One of these mindsets is a scarcity mindset. The other one is an abundance mindset. One of these mindsets leads to a loss of growth and a squelching of transformation. The other one leads to extreme transformation. So are you willing to invest? Are you willing to become abundant? Are you willing to become successful? Are you willing to free up your mind and your time to do what you love to do, what would be best for you, so that you can start thinking about things? Your mind and your attention are more important than your time, but your attention is always caught somewhere. And so you need to free your time, thus freeing your mind so that you can put your attention on what matters. You're gonna miss all the amazing opportunities if your mind is so caught up in the minutia, but if you invest in who's, or in technology, or in relationships, or knowledge that allows you more time and allows you to put your attention on better things. The Harvard psychologist William James, who was the father of American psychology, he said that your experience is whatever you pay attention to. And if you're so busy paying attention to all these things that are ultimately the wrong side of the 80-20, if you're focused on all the 80% of things that are only producing 20% of your results, then you're not free to learn and think and do new things, or even just focus on high value work, or to visualize the future, or to open yourself to new opportunities. Instead, you're so busy down here that a lot of amazing things are passing you by because your attention is so caught up on what you're avoiding. The cost mindset is ultimately an avoidance mindset. There's two orientations. There's an approach mindset and there's an avoidance mindset. Cost mindset is about avoiding costs. It's about cutting costs. It's about avoiding loss. Whereas an investment mindset is about approaching gain. It's about approaching your future self. It's about expanding. So are you trying to avoid loss, or are you trying to approach gain? Are you trying to cut costs, and are you focused too much on yourself, or are you trying to expand yourself and transform yourself, and are you investing in yourself so that you can put your time, energy, and attention on increasingly high value, increasingly high quality things? If you invest wisely, your future self will have better things to think about, to invest in, to worry about. So if you're investing, then over time, you will have more and more time and attention to think about, focus on, and create better things. There is a fundamental difference between needing something and wanting it. If you feel like you need something, then you have an unhealthy attachment. You feel like you need something outside of yourself in order to be happy, or in order to be someone, or in order to be complete, and that leads to a constant, endless game of being on a hamster wheel of always needing something outside of yourself. You're always here but needing to be there, or wanting to be there, and it doesn't really matter what you've accomplished, it doesn't matter where you're at, you're always feeling like you need something. Think about, for example, in a relationship. If you feel like you need the other person, then that's an unhealthy attachment. You've placed your happiness and your identity on that person. Versus if you want someone, you can actually genuinely love them. If you need someone, you're codependent on them. Very unhealthy. Whereas if you want someone, you can genuinely love them, be independent, and then become interdependent. You can be healthy. If you need to be right, then you have ego and you're blocking yourself off from learning. So needing something, even if it's a goal, and recently I've caught myself. I learned in a really great conversation with a friend that I had placed so much of my identity on this future goal, and I'd been striving for it for over a decade, that it had gone from a want to a need. And because I felt like I needed it, I'd become desperate for it. Whenever you feel like you need something, you actually become desperate for that thing and you actually repel it. In psychology, psychologists have broken up passion into two forms. One form of passion is what's called harmonious passion. Harmonious passion is intrinsically motivated. It means that you genuinely want something, you love doing it, and there's a lot of research that shows that flow is part of being harmoniously passionate. If you have a harmonious passion, you can have a lot of flow because you want the thing and you love it and you're committed to it, but it doesn't conflict with the other areas of your life. It actually enhances all other areas of your life. Whereas if you become obsessively passionate about something, you feel like you need it, you become unhealthily attached to it. You begin forcing things and you begin getting out of whack in the other areas of your life. You begin becoming obsessive about this thing, and what ends up happening is you end up pursuing it in unhealthy ways. Again, you become very desperate for it, and it actually leads to unhealthy things like addiction, and it just creates chaos in your life and eventually wrecks you. So when it comes to pursuing goals and things like that, you can absolutely commit to and want whatever it is you want. You can commit 100% to certain goals, but that doesn't mean you actually need them. So there's a difference between needing something and wanting it, and that same difference is being committed to something or being attached to it. You can be 100% committed to something. You can be 100% committed to a goal or an outcome, an achievement. It could be, for example, running a marathon or starting a business, writing a book, meeting someone. You can be 100% committed, but not attached. And when you're not attached, it means you don't necessarily need it. And so you're not desperate for it, but you can want it, and you can be 100% committed to it, but you don't need it. And so you can be harmoniously passionate about it, and even if you don't get it, oh well, if you do get it, then it doesn't change your life. You're already whole and complete as you are. Actually, recently, a funny story has happened. So Trevor Lawrence was the quarterback for Clemson University. One of the main reasons I know this is because I actually got my PhD at Clemson. But Trevor Lawrence has been the #1 prospect for the NFL for the last 3 years, and in a couple weeks from the filming of this video, the NFL draft is going to happen, and Trevor Lawrence is most certainly going to go #1. Well, recently Trevor Lawrence did an interview for Sports Illustrated, and he talked about how he wasn't motivated necessarily by winning championships. He didn't necessarily need to win. He didn't have a chip on his shoulder. He wasn't trying to prove himself to anyone. And the media went crazy in the sports world. They were all like, how dare he say he not need championships? How dare he say that he could walk away from football at any time? And they said if he doesn't need football, then he can't perform at his highest level. Well, it's funny because what Trevor is really saying is, and he's even posted about this on Twitter, he wants football. He's intrinsically motivated towards football, but he has a harmonious passion. He's harmoniously passionate. He's got other areas of his life. He got recently married. He's a very devout Christian. He's got other areas of his life, and he feels whole and complete whether he's a pro football player or whether he's not. Even though he's amazingly talented, he's been the best college football player for years. He was the best high school player forever. He is amazing, but he's harmoniously passionate, and the sports world wants him to be obsessively passionate. They want him to need football. They want it to become the only thing, the be-all, end-all, and they think that that's the only way to win, when in reality, he's going to be able to perform higher by knowing that he doesn't need it, by being committed but not attached, and by realizing that his identity is much bigger than just being a football player. He doesn't need it. He could walk away from it. That doesn't mean he doesn't want it. It doesn't mean he's not 100% committed. He may be even more committed than other people. He's also probably got a longer term perspective. One of the things that you can do to get out of the needing and attachment phase is to develop a longer term vision for your life. If you have a longer term vision for your life, then you can operate more with clarity, with intention, with commitment, versus trying to force things and become desperate and trying to essentially just make things happen in an obsessive way. So a question for you is, thinking about your own life, what is it that maybe you've become overly attached to? Something you feel like you need. Because if you feel like you need something, then what that implies is that you're not whole, complete, and secure in yourself as you are. What Trevor Lawrence said is he's completely secure in who he is as a person. He doesn't need football. He loves football, he's committed to football, he's committed to his craft, he's committed to winning, but he doesn't need any of it. He just wants it. And because he wants it, it's a lot more genuine. It's a lot more intrinsically motivated. He's less driven by externals, and he's more driven by his internal sense, his internal compass. And the sports world, for the most part, didn't like that. But if you actually study high performance, if you study flow, what Trevor is doing is far more in line with high performance. He's committed to winning. He's committed to success. That's how he's gotten to where he's at. But he doesn't need it. He's not attached to it. There's a great quote from Carrie Campbell. She's a mindset coach. She says, expect everything but attach to nothing. That's an amazing mindset because you want to expect success. There's even an amazing motivational theory called expectancy theory, where you've got clear goals, you've got a path to achieving those goals, and you've got growing confidence that you can get there. But you're not attached to the outcome, at least in the short term. You're not attached to this moment. You didn't need it. Yes, it hurt if you lost, or yes, you can learn from your moments. It's not like you're detached from your world. You're just not attached, and you don't need anything. You're just operating out of want. And if you're operating out of want, then you've got agency, you've got choice, you've got freedom. So there are two forms of freedom: freedom from and freedom to. Freedom from means you're free from external and internal constraints. You're free from depression. You're free from tyranny. You're free from not having good laws that allow you to pursue what you want. So we live in a world where we've created a lot of freedom from. We've made, to a large extent, we've removed a lot of the things that would hold us back, and now we're in this space where you can go freedom to. Freedom to means that you have to courageously choose what you want. You have the freedom to pursue whatever it is you want. According to Abraham Maslow, and Maslow created the hierarchy of needs, there's different levels. And the bottom needs, you could say, are that you need shelter, you need protection, you need food. And so once you get up to the higher stages, you're free from all of those things. You're free from hunger, you're free from illness, you're free from a lack of self-esteem. And because you're free from all of those things, those external and internal constraints, you can then be free to be self-actualized, free to pursue whatever you want. Most people, they never take on the second freedom, which is the freedom to be whoever they want to be, the freedom to move forward, the freedom to just act purely out of want. That's where Trevor Lawrence is. He's free to be whoever he wants to be. He's got no needs. He's free from caring what other people think about him. He's free from needing to win. He's free from needing football. He's free to pursue football with his whole soul. He's free to be the person he wants to be. He's free from needing other people's approval. You want to be free from needs. And needs are mostly internal addictions or things, or they're just a loss of complete freedom. When you've removed all needs, internal and external, and then you can just operate purely out of want, then you're free to be whoever you want to be, and you're free to be harmonious. You're free to be in flow. And then you can just be in the moment and completely perform at your highest level, and you can do what you want because you want to, not because you feel like you need to, and not because you're of any other lower level reason. So whatever thing you need, what if you shifted that to a want? And what if you removed the needs that you thought you needed and realized you're good where you're at? You are good and whole as you are. You can become secure as a person. You're not tied up in this thing. Yes, you can want it. Yes, you can be committed, but you don't need it.
There are 3 levels of an optimal mindset. The first one is that you have to fully forgive your past self. The second is that you have to be completely confident and non-attached to your current self. And the third is that you've got to visualize and create your future self. If you have a happy past and if you have a compelling future, then you will be profoundly powerful and happy in the moment. From a psychology standpoint, The past, the present, and the future all exist simultaneously. They're all here and now. You can visualize a future experience. You can even be grateful for it. You can see it, and that experience can be so powerful that your brain doesn't even recognize that it's just imagination. Albert Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge. So let's start with the first, that you need a happy, a healthy, and a healed former self. Trauma is any experience that cripples you. It's any experience that shatters your identity and leaves you with what psychologists would call a fixed mindset. You may have a bad experience, or someone may call you a name, or something may happen that was unexpected that then leads you to believing that you cannot do something. It stops you from feeling capable. Trauma is basically a dysfunctional belief about something. It's a negative belief towards something. It's a negative meaning. It's something you've held on to. And because of that, you're now less capable as a person, and now you have less hope in the future. As an example, a dear friend of mine, she always wanted to be an artist, and she decided to take an art class. And during that art class, the teacher corrected her in a way that made her feel terrible. And so the meaning that she gave to that experience of her art teacher correcting her was, I'm not very good at art. So because she had a negative emotional experience and then she framed it in a negative way and in a way that ultimately limited her identity, she said, I must not be good at art because he's correcting me in these ways. She didn't have to give that meaning, but that's the meaning she gave, and as a result, she had a limiting identity, and it stopped her from having a compelling future with art. So when you have a fixed mindset, you don't believe the future can be any different. So a key is that you want to forgive your former self. Recognize that you're not your former self. Your former self was a different person than you. Just as an example, think about things that you do now, or that you know, or that you focus on that your former self didn't know about. Think about the things that your former self used to say yes to. For example, my former self, me at 18, used to say yes to playing 18 hours a day of video games. Current version of Benjamin Hardy would never do that, but I'm not mad at former Benjamin Hardy. I'm also not mad at the former version of me for some of my ignorances. Maybe I could be upset and have FOMO that my former self didn't invest in Bitcoin 5 years ago, even though I knew all about it and I had lots of friends telling me about it. But again, my former self was in a different place. They were focused on different things. They didn't know what I now know. They're not in the same world that I'm in. They don't have the same context, the same perspective, the same knowledge. There's a great quote from the British philosopher, Alain de Botton. He said, if you're not embarrassed by who you were 12 months ago, you didn't learn enough. Now, you don't necessarily need to be embarrassed by your former self, but it's very powerful to recognize that you are not your former self. Even looking at who you were 12 months ago, what you cared about 12 months ago, what goals you were pursuing, what beliefs you had. Josh Waitzkin, who is a learning expert, he also wrote the book, The Art of Learning, always asks himself this question: what did I believe 3 months ago that I no longer believe today? Or what did I accept as truth 3 months ago that I would no longer accept today? Or what conditions did I accept 3 months ago that I would no longer accept today? Dan Sullivan, the co-founder of Strategic Coach, which is the #1 coaching program in the world, he has a concept called always be the buyer. And the idea is that there are buyers and sellers. A seller is someone trying to sell you something. For example, a used car salesman. That used car salesman could be trying to sell you a car, and if you're the buyer, you can reject the seller. You can say, no thanks, I don't want that. The seller is the one who gets rejected. And so a question you could ask yourself is, what do you now reject that your former self used to say yes to? Even 3, 6, 12 months ago, what are the things that you no longer accept? You reject, you now say no to things. It could be behaviors, it could be relationships, it could be situations, it could be a job. It could be a certain amount of money, it could be a mindset, it could be a belief system. But what are the things or the relationships, the situations, the commitments that your former self, even a year ago or 6 months ago, said yes to that you now say no to? As you increase in your confidence, as you increase in your vision, and as you continue to take intentional and courageous actions forward, your standards and your expectations improve, and you can say no to things you used to say yes to. As an example, in the last 3 months, I've said no to a lot of things that I used to say yes to. I've said no to a book agent that I didn't resonate with. I'm even saying no to a book publisher that no longer makes sense to me. I'm now saying no to things that my former self loved. I'm saying no to things that were the dreams of my former self. I'm saying no to things that are no longer interesting to me because now my vision for my future self has changed. So wherever your former self was, there's no reason to be mad at them. Instead, you just want to gratefully acknowledge that you're no longer them. You see the world differently. You know things that they don't know. You're less ignorant, and so therefore you can make better decisions.
But there's no reason to be mad at your former self. Instead, you want to frame your former self as a hero, someone you're grateful for, someone you love. Always forgive your former self, and also frame your past in what Dan Sullivan would call the gain. You want to frame your past from a perspective of gratitude. Your past is basically a meaning. This is what psychologists have found, is that it's actually your present perspective that shapes the meaning of your past. The past is always reconstructed in the present. So what may have been viewed in the past as a bad experience can be reshaped and reframed into an experience you were grateful for. As another example, back when I was a teenager, my father was an extreme drug addict, and I used to associate a lot of disappointment in my father. I used to be embarrassed by my life. I used to be upset and feel like, why me? But now, with a lot more perspective, a lot better context, also a lot of amazing awe at my father's change. He's no longer a drug addict. He's overcome that, and he's even become an addiction counselor to help other people at times. He's done that in the past. And so I'm no longer upset at my father. I'm actually blown away at him, and I also understand more fully why he would have gone into addictions and why he was in his own depression. And so I now have views of my former self, who was going through those challenging experiences as a teenager, and also of my father and his own inadequacies and his own difficulties. And I now see those from a different perspective, and so I don't have to frame the experience the same way my 16-year-old self did. You know you haven't grown when you still see the same experiences the same way you did 5, 10 years ago. And so hopefully you can recontextualize and view the past from a lot more compassionate, healthy, and healing perspective. If you can turn your past into gratitude and post-traumatic growth, meaning you use even hard experiences to have a greater sense of purpose, meaning, and calling in life, you can use those experiences to help other people. You can use those experiences to be better and not bitter. You can say, this happened for me, not to me. Then you have more agency over your past. Your past is a meaning that you assign. You're the one who decides your narrative, and your narrative is in large part what shapes your identity. Your identity is how you see yourself, but it's based on the narrative you tell about your past, your present, and your future. You want a positive narrative about your past. You want to be grateful for your past. You want to view everything from your past that it happened for you and not to you. You want your past to be experiences that can enable you to have a better future self. If you avoid learning from your past and instead you just simply avoid it and you frame it as, oh, that happened to me, and you remove the agency from yourself, then what's going to happen is you're going to continuously repeat the past because you're not learning from it. You're not choosing to learn from it. In the book Power versus Force, David Hawkins created this scale of consciousness. It's brilliant. It's a 0 to 1,000 scale, and anything below 200 on this scale creates negative outcomes. It's a negative emotional state. And there is fear, there's anger, there's shame, there's judgment, all of those things. And what Hawkins has found in studying literally millions of people is that 80% of the population exist between fear and anger, which obviously those emotional states create negative outcomes. And most people have unresolved trauma from their past that they haven't dealt with, and so they're repeating past cycles. And then they experience triggers that ultimately pull them into the past, and it leads to self-defeating behavior. So instead, you ultimately want to face your past, journal about it, reflect on it, learn from it, get new context, and ultimately create a healthy, positive meaning. You want a positive past no matter what happened. With a positive past, you can become what is called anti-fragile. Anti-fragile is the opposite of fragile. If you have a fixed mindset and if you are shocked by trauma in your past, then you're increasingly fragile because of your past. But if you view the past as everything happened for me, then you're increasingly anti-fragile. You're the opposite of fragile. You become stronger and more capable and more powerful and more enabled because of your past, especially the hardest experiences. You're incredibly grateful for everything that happened to you. I can say with pure gratitude that I am incredibly grateful that my father was a drug addict while I was in high school. I would not have learned the things that I now know. I wouldn't have been forced to learn. There's a great quote from Will Durant. He said that the ability of the average person could be doubled if the situation demanded it. I was demanded because of my situation to learn and deal with things that I would not have had to had I had a more simplistic environment. And so you can choose the framing of any experience. Gratitude is the ultimate positive framing of the past, being grateful for what happened, being enabled, and ultimately having post-traumatic growth so that you're anti-fragile. You're increasingly capable because of whatever happened to you. You're not crippled. In other words, you have a powerful view of your future self because of what happened instead of having a loss of hope, which is trauma. Now, the second stage
is that you are confident in your current self, but you're also not attached to your current self. We live in a world where people want to identify with themselves. They want personality tests to tell them who they are. They want to box themselves. They want to overly explain themselves. And the fixed mindset, in a lot of ways, is an over-attachment to your current self, to your current capabilities, to your current worldview. It's important to realize that your current self is temporary. There's a great quote from Daniel Gilbert. He's a Harvard psychologist. And he said that the person you are today is as transient and as fleeting as every other person you've ever been. Who you are today is not the be-all end-all. Your future self is going to be a different person than you are. In fact, they're going to be more different than you can currently predict. Just like right now, you're more different than your former self probably thought you were. The person you were 10 years ago probably could not have predicted who you would be today. They wouldn't have predicted all the changes in you. They wouldn't have been able to predict how you view the world and what matters to you and what you're up to. Same is true of your future self. Your future self will be a different person, and so because they will be a different person, there's no reason for you to overly solidify and overly attach yourself to your current self. In the future, you will see the world differently. In the future, you can be different. And the whole essence of the growth mindset is that you live your life based on imagination. You view your future self as a different person. They've got enhanced capabilities, a better situation. Maybe they have more empathy, more self-control. Maybe they have skills and abilities that you don't have. Maybe they have millions of dollars, or maybe they have the capability to travel the world. Whatever it is that you imagine, imagination is more important than knowledge, and the things that you think about are what you become. And so you realize that who you are right now is not who you're always going to be, and so you don't overly attach yourself to what you do. You also can have a state of freedom and flexibility of trying new things and failing, and if things don't work out, you don't overly identify with those. You know that you can and be different things, and that who you are right now is just a mile marker along the way. So you can be a lot more flexible, and you don't have to overly define your current self. You don't have to take personality tests and say, this is who I am. Instead, you can just realize that this is where you're at right now, and that your future self will be different. So you want to have confidence and belief and love and trust towards your current self, just like you would forgive your former self, but you don't want to overly attach to your current self. Instead, you want to operate with imagination, anticipation, and excitement while still being present and in flow in the current self. You want to love your current self. You want to be here, not necessarily there, although you have vision and imagination. You still want to be here and be grateful, happy for your current self. One of the ways to do that is to have a long-term vision of your future. If you're playing a long game, like let's just say 5, 10, 15 years out, then you don't necessarily need to be trying to force it and rush your way to the next stop. Instead, you're in love with the game you're playing, you're happy with it. You know the game is going to evolve and change, but you're very happy with where you are. You're happy and you're confident that you know that things are going to progressively get better. So the third stage is that you create your future self. Abraham Lincoln said that the best way to predict the future is to create it yourself. Albert Einstein, as I've already said imagination is more important than knowledge. Daniel Gilbert, who is the Harvard psychologist, has spent a lot of time studying what he calls the psychology of your future self. Now, it's important to realize your future self is largely in your hands. It's also important to realize that your future self is your choice. But whatever view you do have of your future self is probably the largest indicator of who you are right now and what you're doing. Let me give you an example. If you see your future self as someone who's highly successful, and you're excited about that vision, and you are compelled toward it, then that will shape your behavior here and now. Whatever view you have of your future is what's guiding and shaping your behavior in the present. If you are someone who's religious and you believe in the afterlife and you have desires for that, that view of your future is going to shape your present. Whatever view you have of the future is in large part shaping your behavior in the present. And I love the quote from Dan Sullivan. He said, "The only way to make your present better is by making your future bigger." And so in psychology, we call this idea prospection. Prospection is the idea that human beings are different from other species on Earth, plants, animals, etc., because we spend a lot of time thinking about our future and visualizing our future, and whatever view you have of the future is the thing that shapes you. And from a performance standpoint, when it comes to operating at the subconscious level and performing at the highest level, as an example, there's a book called The Inner Game of Tennis. And the goal of optimal high performance is that you visualize your end state. You visualize yourself doing what you want to do, and then you stop overly controlling it with your conscious mind. In that book, they call it Self 1 and Self 2. Self 1 is your conscious mind, which tries to control everything, and Self 2 is actually your subconscious, which is actually your physical body. And so the goal of high performance in tennis is that rather than overly trying to control every shot, which is non-effective, you can't overly control everything with your conscious mind. Instead, you use your conscious mind to visualize the outcome that you want. And then what you do is you completely let go and you let the body take over. And the body is so fluid. Your subconscious is so much more powerful than your conscious mind that if you actually just get it out of the way and learn to turn off self-one, learn to turn off judgments, learn to turn off overly attaching to outcomes in the moment, and instead you just continually visualize the outcome you want, and then you let go. And you let self-two or your subconscious take over, then you can continuously perform at a higher level. Then you can continuously increase and improve without trying to over-control it. So a lot of it, when it comes to creating your future self, is getting very good at visualizing in vivid detail and also with emotion. You want gratitude, you want joy, you want to feel it, you want to see it, you want to accept it, you want to embrace it. You want a compelling and exciting future that's detailed and vivid that you've created yourself. And then while you're moving in that direction, you want to try to not overly control it, but you want to let it go and let your body move in that direction. Let your subconscious create those outcomes for you. That's why Thomas Edison said, never go to bed without a request to your subconscious. At night, you can visualize your future self. You can visualize even the problems you're trying to solve right now. You can visualize the outcomes that you want in the near and far term, and then you let it go. And you let your subconscious get to work on it. Your subconscious is the thing that's allowing you to breathe right now. It's the thing pumping your heart right now. It's the thing doing 95% of what your body is doing and thinking right now. And if you just guide your subconscious with your physical mind by imagining the future states that you want, imagining the outcomes you want, and then learning to turn off self-one from its judgments and its critiques. If you fail, or if something doesn't go right, you don't have to turn it into a trauma. Instead, you can just be at peace knowing that you're moving in that direction. You're just subconsciously slow boiling into the person you want to become. You can also obviously take bold, intentional, courageous actions with your conscious mind. You can consciously pursue big things, but at the same time, you don't want to overly attach to what your behavior is in the moment. I challenge you to visualize your future self, visualize it every day, and then to take action in that direction and to not be attached to what you're doing in the present, but to accept that your future self is already you and to be your future self right now. You can be your future self right now, and the more you just accept that your future self is who you are, the more you accept that the future you want is who you're going to be, your organic behavior is going to shift in that direction. Because again, your identity is the story you tell about yourself. And so if you see and tell yourself the story of your future self, then your behavior is going to naturally flow in that direction. It's going to expect and create in that direction. And it's going to be more courageous in that direction. And it's going to be less attached to the failures and the learning along the way. And you're going to become your future self. So to break this down in most simple terms, a healthy, optimal mindset in psychology is three things. One, a positive, forgiven, and healed and grateful past that allows you to be anti-fragile. Everything happens for you, not to you. Everything makes you better, not bitter. Then it's having a confident, courageous, and accepting current self, also a non-attached and non-overly defined current self. And then finally, it's a compelling, exciting future self that you yourself created yourself and that you are continuously fueling, and then you're letting the subconscious move you in that direction by not trying to overly control and overly fix, but just visualizing the future self and getting better and better at performing from an optimal subconscious level and watching it happen. I'm Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Here's the next video on the Future Self series. Please like this video. Please push the thumbs up button. Please subscribe to the channel. Also down below, if you want a peak state checklist, which has been downloaded by over 800,000 people, please click the link and download that peak state checklist. Have an amazing day.